Healing My Four Bodies 101, Week 2, Emotional Body, Lesson 2, Part 1. Make sure you follow along with Healing My Four Bodies book. It is available on Amazon for those of you who are obviously boycotting it. I understand. I do have a separate link. I do have limited inventory, so make sure that you comment or send me a DM so that you can obtain a signed copy directly from me. So before we get into emotional body, I want to first describe the difference between mental body and emotional body, because next week we're focusing on mental, and I need you to understand the difference between the two. Emotional body, this week we're going to focus on your feelings, your emotions, emotion regulation, emotion validation. Your mental body includes your thought patterns, how you talk to yourself, your unhelpful thinking patterns. We'll move into that next week, but right now for this week, I want you to ground in your emotions. So take a moment here, pause, take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, and just notice what emotion word pops up for you. How do you feel in your physical body, right? How do you feel physically? And then how do you feel emotionally? Uh, Internal feeling and an external feeling. An external feeling could be the softness of the sweater I'm wearing. An internal feeling is an actual emotion word. And like I said before, I feel some type of way is not an emotion. So I like to share a resource. If you go to feelingswheel.com, you'll be able to see a feelings wheel that I have often used with clients in the past who have struggled with identifying their emotions. Believe it or not, a lot of people, a lot of adults don't understand how to identify their emotions, let alone process them and regulate them. That means that they are not appropriately reacting to the emotions that they have. I want to make it clear, all emotions are valid. All emotions are valid. It's a matter of how you react to that emotion that really sets you apart from whether or not you are elevated in your emotional body or whether you might need some work. And I'm going to introduce a few concepts. In my previous career, I was once a psychotherapist, and I used DBT skills or dialectical behavioral skills, where we often use concepts like mindfulness and emotion regulation and action urge to ride the wave of the urges that we have to react, right? We want to ride those waves. We don't want to actually react, right? We want to pause and we want to react in positive ways, ways that do not involve or will not, give us any negative consequences as a result of our behavior. One of the quotes that I really love is that no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. And I really truly believe that we do have the power to check ourselves, right? When we learn and we ground and we practice mindfulness and these tools to help us to learn to regulate our emotions and react to them effectively in positive manners that, one, don't injure anyone, two, don't hurt anyone emotionally or physically, right? I guess that's the same as one. And more importantly, that it's processed in a healthy way. So you're using helpful coping skills to process that emotion. A lot of us are quick to react. I like to say, for those of us who grew up in humbling beginnings, sometimes these things are not things that are taught to us growing up. We are taught to react first. And so it does take some time as you work through your emotional body and regulating your emotions and identifying them and finding ways to cope with them and release them. That's helpful. Remember the book, The Body Keeps the Score. That book is a good resource that I recommend to anyone if you want to learn more. I'm going to go into part 2. So if you want to learn more, stay tuned. Here is your emotional body activity. Thanks for sharing your emotions. I want to validate all of them. Find your emotion word. For those of you who are listening, go ahead, pause, check in, and take a minute to breathe and ask yourself how you're feeling in your emotional body. Reference the feelingswheel.com, which I talked about in the previous video. And here's a wheel I used to use with clients. If you go down here, you'll see the original older version. The colors are based off of high vibration or low vibration colors is how I interpret it. I don't want to say that any feeling is wrong or bad. All feelings are valid, and if you want to donate to keep the site up, you can donate there to keep the site up. Now we're going to go and find hopeful, and we're going to look at the other words around hopeful, or the other emotions around hopeful. So we have hopeful here, right? Is there something we can be optimistic about? Is there something we can be trusting of? These are things we want to ask ourselves, right? How do we now get to that root feeling of happiness, right? We can stay here. We can definitely stay here. Feeling hopeful is a really good feeling, right? But if we want to advance a little bit, do we need these? And these are just some self-inquiry questions, right, to ask yourself. Now we're going to go and find overwhelmed. So we have overwhelmed up here. We have all these other words around it, if you can see them. And then we want to dissect it. So overwhelmed, what are we anxious about? How can we ground in our body to support the anxiety and how it's showing up physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? And then the root of that is fearful. what are we fearful of? How can we start to release fear out of the vessel? Especially because when we hold on to fear, which is valid, your feelings are valid, all feelings are valid, we hold on to fear, it also impacts our sacral and our root chakra, right? When we're fearful of things, our ability to create, our ability to manifest. There's a lot that goes into it, but this is just very simple how I tie in the emotions with the spiritual as well as the physical. And this week we're focusing primarily on physical body. So here's your activity. For those of you who are just tuning in, go ahead, find your emotion and dissect it, and go on and ask yourself some questions around the emotion. And grab my book, Healing My Four Bodies.